Hi again. Continuing with our review of books about instructional material, I just want to again talk a little bit about the martial arts aspect. And I mentioned previously that the way the martial arts were taught, the Japanese model, really doesn't suit the Western way of learning. And another aspect is that the martial arts, particularly karate, as I was taught it, are an example of a process orientated system. And what this means is that the actual procedure of training is the most important thing. It's the form, it's the subjective standards, and so on. So that the reason that you are training is the training, basically. You are there to just go through the training, rather than outcome-based training, which you have a clearly defined outcome, what you want to achieve, and you then direct the training towards that. And it's quite notable in the martial arts, and there's nothing wrong with just having training as a martial art, the art side of it, or the cultural aspect, and just doing that for the rest of your life. That's certainly a very positive thing to do. However, if your desired outcome is self-protection, then you should have the training directed towards that. And I know from personal experience, a lot of people came in to the martial arts wanting a method of self-protection, and they ended up wearing white pajamas and marching up and down the floor, and were kind of captured by the system and became involved in an art. And again, that's okay, unless you really do want to learn self-protection. I've been of the opinion that if it takes a person 5 years to gain a black belt, then that person should be able to train someone else to gain the black belt in about 3 years, because they're aware of all the pitfalls, they realize shortcuts and so on, and dead ends in the training and so on. You should be able to streamline it. I mentioned this to a good friend of mine who's an international level competitor, and he completely disagreed. Oh no, it's got to take the same amount of time. It's got to take 5 years because it's a process oriented. And if you take Fairbairn, he studied the martial arts, and particularly Chinese martial arts, while he was in Shanghai. And he said clearly, instead of just teaching it as he'd been taught, he got rid of a lot of it, and he said it was 80% ritual, and he slimmed it down into what we would now call combatives. And that's the whole idea. It's a kind of critical path analysis of what you actually need, rather than what's just taught from a syllabus that's always been done that way for a long time. When it comes to firearms training, a similar thing happened with Jeff Cooper. He was of the opinion that it took several years to become expert, and then a chap called John Plain joined his group, and he was involved in sports education, and he did this critical path analysis, watched the guys in action, find out what you needed to do and what you didn't need to do to achieve the aim, and he condensed it all down to a very short time, to the point where Colonel Cooper was teaching his course in a week. So he was taking guys from zero to expert in a week. Not everyone qualified, but you could achieve expert in a week. So that's kind of what I'm talking about with this. And that leads us into firearms training. And a book I want to talk about, The Art of Instruction by Mike Seeklander. Your Complete Guide to Instructional Excellence. Now, Mike Seeklander, his background was US Marines, and then he was a police officer. But he was also a very keen competitive shooter, particularly with the pistol. And he was involved in US PSA shooting, the IPSC, IPSC. And not long after 9/11, one of the top competitive shooters, Jerry Barnard, was talking to him at a match, and he said the air marshals are looking for firearms instructors because they'd had to recruit thousands of guys to fly after the Twin Towers were attacked. At the time, it's quite well known that there were only 33 air marshals active at the time. There should have been 36, but they only had 33, and they were. It was an overseas based activity, and what they were doing was recruiting all these guys, and they, immediately what they did, they put everyone they could on the flights, and people from wildlife police and everything, but were flying on the jet. Anyway, so Mike made a phone call and ended up being a contract instructor at Atlantic City. It was still the FAA in those days running the air marshal program. And after a while, he decided to become certified as a FAM himself, Federal Air Marshal himself. And he went through the whole process, went out to Artesia and went then back to Atlantic City and started flying. And then he went back into the instructional realm. And he says himself that although he was a really good shooter and a competitor, he learned how to be an instructor on the job. And this book really is the accumulation of all that he picked up while actually training, firstly the air marshals and then others in federal law enforcement. And he was sent down to FLETC to take their instructional programs, and he puts a lot of it in the book. Some of the material covered why people want to learn from you. It's instructor credibility, barriers to learning, the EDIP model, explanation, demonstration, imitation, and performance. Range management, safety, leading other instructors, instructional development. There's a lot of practical material in the book, how to actually run the procedures, how to set it up, the ranges, pros and cons, problem students, all this kind of thing. And at the end of the day, firearms training is, along with arguably first aid, the two most important things that you should be training in to if you have to confront violent people. And this whole book is about training to keep the good guys alive. So it's a very, very valuable resource. And I first read it in the States. My good friend Shane had a copy, and I actually read it over there. But as soon as I got back to the UK, I bought it because it's material you need to have yourself and dip into and use on a regular basis. And even if you're not actually a firearms instructor, there's an awful lot of material for generic instruction of physical skills, which is valuable too. So it's a great book to have.